Welcome to Horror Makes Us Happy, the podcast where we ask the question, what is it about horror that makes us happy? Your hosts are Steve Becker and myself, Chris Whitman, and you can find out more about us at our website, horrormakesUsHappy.com. There's a link tree there with a bunch of other links and a bunch of other .coms and .bizes and .xyzs and
No.
There's a link tree there. No .xyzs?
No.
Okay, none of those. But you can check it out at the website, which once again is horrormakesUsHappy.com.
Yes.
Before we get started, this is the trigger warning. This is a horror podcast and we talk about horror things, so we could delve into sensitive subjects that may include curses, words, and or dangerous violence things.
You have been
in
warned.
A fun way.
Hopefully.
In a good way. Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah.
Today we're talking to Mr. Jeremy Torrie, a producer, writer, and director, best known for his work with Silent Night, Deadly Night 2025, Parallel Minds, Mr. Soul, and A Flesh Offering. Welcome.
Good afternoon.
Yes.
How are you?
I'm very good, thanks.
Our pleasure for having you here. Before we get into the yes, before we get into the meat of the interview, you want to let people know what you're currently working on?
Sure. I'm actually just in post-production right now on a feature film called Coppermine, which is sort of the origin story for, if any of you around the world have heard, the Mounties always get their man.
Mm.
This happened in 1915, and it was the story of two Roman Catholic priests who went north at the order of the bishop in Edmonton to try to convert the Inuit in the Arctic Circle, sort of one of the last places that Canada had not exerted its sovereignty. And so they went up there, and they were very ill-equipped. They became desperate. They were starving. They had a rifle with them, which they pointed at two Inuit hunters. That resulted in them sort of feeling threatened and thought they were crazy, thought they were possessed. So they killed them and ate portions of their hearts, or not their hearts, their livers, because that is the custom that they do up there, because they obviously don't want you to rise from the dead and come at them again. So anyway.
And eating the liver prevents them from rising from the dead. Interesting.
Yeah. So anyway, long story short, a year goes by. The bishop hasn't received any letters. What's going on? Hey, Northwest Mounted Police, I want you to find them. And you got to remember, this is like over 2,500 miles as the crow flies before there were any verifiable maps. So this is a very
Mounties are like, sure.
Yeah. So it's like, yeah, why not? They get up, they find the bodies, and they go to the next community and say, you know what's happened here? And they're like, yeah, we killed them in self-defense. And they're like, he says, well, you got to come back and face a jury in Edmonton. And so they then begin another year-long journey south, to which there was a trial, and remarkably, an all-white jury found them not guilty by reason of self-defense in 1917.
Very remarkably. Yeah.
Incredible. But, of course, the Canadian government and the church didn't like that, so they created a new trial and found them guilty and sentenced them to hang. So that's the
how dare they?
That's the current film, and we're at a film festival literally last night. Many Wounds is my contemporary reimagining of Once Were Warriors, the classic Maori film from 1994. I held the remake rights for 15 years before we were able to get into production a couple of years ago, and we shot a very personal story because of what I witnessed and survived in my own household with my mother and her partner at the time, who was schizophrenic, and it was very violent and put my siblings and I in peril, along with my mother. And so I put all of that into Many Wounds, setting it in modern day North End, Winnipeg. And basically the lead character, Mashka, is a young teenager who's reliving all of this the way I did. And he ends up in the foster care system, or not the foster care system, in Child and Family Services, which is different than the foster care system, but it's what we call up here in Canada the new residential school. It's sort of now a different way that the governments are able to, exert themselves and impose their values on our people. And, it's a really sad situation. But nonetheless, he finds a man, native man, who is trying to teach him what it means to be a real warrior. Because we've kind of lost that. You got to remember going back, you guys had the Indian Wars for many years down south. Canada decided they wanted to do it in a more quote unquote civilized way, because they're descended from Brits and French and that kind of thing. So they created these residential schools that were administered by the churches, and did all kinds of devilish things that I'm also writing about, which is a really cool script that I hope to get into production in the next 2 to 3 years. But anyway, cool. That's just a roundabout way of saying, we're keeping busy, and we got
lots of irons on the fire.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. Well, this interview is going to be less about your body of work and more about what you've been a fan of and some of your personal stuff. That said, it's not meant to be a therapy session. So if there's any questions we ask that you don't want to answer, you just say pass and move on. Yeah. But starting with childhood, what are some of your earliest memories of scary things?
Well, I got to tell you, it looks pretty hokey now as a grown-up, but Stephen King, they did that one with the vampire floating in the window for TV. I forget the name of the show.
The Lost Boys?
No, that wasn't it. But it was one of his earlier novels, and it was one of the first adaptations.
Salem's Lot?
Maybe. Might have been. Maybe. When it's like the scratching with the nail at the window and floating and like, open the door. Let me in. And I was just like, holy shit. If I ever see that and I'm on the second floor or wherever, it's like, I know that that's, not human, and I'm going to like shit my pants. Right. So that was probably one of my very earliest memories of fiction that it influenced me in a real visceral way that literally made the hair stand up on my arms and the back of my neck.
Yeah, I do recall Salem's Lot. I think I looked it up, and there is a Stephen King Salem's Lot, and the imagery of it is a person floating in front of a window.
Yeah, so it was pretty, like, looking at it as a grown-up, it was pretty cheesy, but I remember as a very young boy, I was like, oh my God. And then, of course, my grandparents, they have a very small, tiny island on Lake of the Woods up here in Canada. And I remember as a teenager, I'd stay out there sometimes by myself, just take the small 14-foot tinny and whatever, and you're by yourself, and your imagination is like literally, a ping pong ball bouncing all over the place. And I distinctly remember going, if I see glowing eyes when I'm looking out the window, when I'm here by myself and no way to defend myself, again, I'm literally gonna lose my shit, right? So, because that's just the way my mind has always worked. I actually recall, I think I was between 6 and 7 years old, and I became aware of mortality. I knew I was going to die. I woke up from this dream or a nightmare, and I was screaming. I was so distraught. And my grandfather comes upstairs, and he's like, what's going on? And I'm like, I'm going to die. You're going to die. I don't want you to die. Everybody's going to die. And he was very practical because he was a doctor.
I don't want to laugh, but I'm picturing like maybe a hypothetical situation where he's on the phone with a friend. He's like, hold on, I got to go. My 7-year-old's having an existential crisis.
Yeah. Well, this was probably like 2, 3 in the morning. So it was in the middle of the night. Right? And so he was literally like trying to bring me down. And he's like, look, we're here on the farm. All the cows, all the sheep, all the chickens, everything, they all die. That's the cycle of life. That's the circle of life. And you have to sort of make peace with that, because if you don't, you're going to fear it for your entire days. And so that always stuck with me. And it really motivated me as a young person to like grow up way too quick and get on with life, because I literally felt the clock ticking from that very moment. And so, I started reading voraciously. I was exploring anything and everything, and very independent, because my mom was a single parent, and even though we lived in Winnipeg, my grandparents lived in Kenora, north of town, and he was a doctor, and he was a psychologist, and he was also the what do you call him? Not the mortician, but the guy who did the autopsies, the coroner. Yeah, so he was like. He was very busy, and I always remember one time going to the hospital, and he's like just finished up, and he's like eating a sandwich, and I'm like,
"They are always eating a fucking sandwich." I commented on that the other day. I swear, every horror movie where I see there's a scene with a coroner examining the body, why is that? Is it in the charter?
It's gotta be. I think it's just the morbidity of like, okay, there's literally cold meat right there.
I was going with, it just being a trope to show that how unconcerned they are about the death, but the cold meat connection, that's
makes you want
like
a cold cut,
Well, that's like having to go to the bathroom when you hear water running.
Exactly.
There you go.
There's cold meat right there, and I want a sandwich.
You know what? I think I'm hungry.
What was it? There's a scene in Return of the Living Dead where the guy's listening to classical music, and I'm pretty sure he was eating a sandwich too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but that I was going to ask, like with the discovery.
Now I'm going to have to change that now, because I do have a scene in a drama where they go to identify the body, and the dude is eating a sandwich, and he's got mustard all over his cheeks and lips and everything. And I thought that was kind of interesting, but now he's going to have to do something else, because that's a little too cliche now.
Yeah.
No, I say leave it.
It's true to life, apparently.
It is, and it's a cliche, but it's an honored cliche,
right? I almost hate to say this, but there's that thing about some stereotypes being true.
Art imitating life, or life imitating art, huh?
Oh God!
But no, that's interesting. You bring up that your dad was a coroner, because I was going to ask, like, discovering mortality at 7 years old and such like a concrete definition of what mortality means. Like, I guess did that come from? Was there anything that spawned that or catalysted that, or was it just related to your dad?
I don't know. I mean, he. What was interesting was that he adopted my mom. Right, I'm Ojibwe, and our family is from Wabigoon Lake Ojibwe Nation, which is to the east of Kenora. And my mom was adopted out in what is called the 60 Scoop, which was another wonderful policy by the Canadian government to assimilate us into white nationalism and whatever else. So nonetheless, that's why I keep the name Torrie, because he was such an incredible man to me when I didn't have a father figure. And so he was the one that literally was like, education is the key, read books, do not stop having a thirst for knowledge, asking questions, all of those things, and really helped me, set me on my path. But what he also, aside from being a doctor, he had Scottish roots, and he kept Highland cows.
Huh.
And I remember, these are the furry ones with the long horns, right? So I remember one time, like, we would butcher them right there. Either he or my uncle would, bring the rifle down, and they'd shake the pail of grain, and they'd come obediently, and then pow, right to the head, and then flop over on their side, and then we'd immediately cut off the hooves so they wouldn't break anybody's legs, and then you'd slit their throats, and then you'd hang them and quarter them. And sometimes I remember one time my uncle used a chainsaw to quarter this animal, which was probably not very smart, because I think it added bone shards into some of the meat. So, So
not to mention getting stuff everywhere.
Yeah. And also I do remember, like, chickens running around with their heads cut off and blood
Mhm.
squirting out of the top of their necks and stuff. And I was like, this is fucking cool. This is way more interesting than what's going on in my classroom, you know.
I
So,
mean, it is cool. The thing that's supposed to be dead is running around, and it's not dead, kind of.
absolutely. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the way I grew up, and he was super, super. A matter of fact, he was an atheist, but he always reminded me, "You're Ojibwe. These are your people." And he would do house calls at a time on reserve when people wouldn't do that. He, despite being an atheist, would go into the sweat lodge and people talk about Doc Torrie and his size 13 shoes being outside the sweat and stuff. Like, they remember that stuff. And I grew up all around it, constantly going back and forth between being sort of a fair-skinned native while not being accepted fully because I hadn't connected with my family in Wabigoon yet, because we actually didn't know any of our family until much later in life. And, thankfully we were able to do so. But, you've got these questions of identity. Who am I? What's my role in this life and in this universe? All of these existential questions I had as a teenager, like an early teenager. And I just wanted to grow up so I could be fully in control, not have to rely on anybody else, not make any excuses, and get on with things. So when I was 20 years old, that was the first time I went in the sweat lodge, and it was with our premier of Manitoba, Wab Canoe, his father, Peter Kelly. He was the one that took me in for the first time and gave me my first traditional name. And it was really something, because I had had so much angst about belonging and who I was and so on. And I remember saying, like, what is my role in this life? And they said, the ancestors responded and they said, you're Azuke Winani, which is storyteller. And as long as you follow your path, you will forever be looked after in this lifetime. And so they said, don't worry about the color of your skin. We know what's on the inside, and that's what matters. There's a reason why you have a good command of the English language. There's a reason why you have fair skin. You are to bring the two solitudes together through storytelling to try to make a difference in this life. And I'm like, okay, that's pretty cool. And of course, the thread that ties everything into everything that I do is the spirituality. As such, we look at things differently. And it kind of guides me too in my own whole moral character, right? The idea of just remember that the ancestors are watching, which speaks to another story that was given to me at my birth that I didn't know about, because I had, I'd done a few movies by the time this thing came about, which is called The Shaman. And it is based on a true story. And we also have a spirit that we refer to as the Wendigo, and this spirit is real. And in so I should also point out, this is also the same sweat where I asked for permission to tell this story. This particular spirit came and roared over the treetops and made it snow in the beginning of November when there was no snow in the forecast, and then circled around and used the turtle as an intermediary and said, "You've called me, what do you want?" And I said, well, the story that I want to tell, involves you, a depiction of you in this thing that I want to tell. And he granted me permission and said, I will, as long as you understand the duality of what I am. And how he is depicted in the script is sort of like Two-Face from Batman, where he's got one side is sort of human, sort of withered, and the other half is the face of an animal. And that's a duality, a dualistic nature, that he can literally kill you, but he can also give life. And that's incredibly powerful.
So you mentioned having this dream. Did you have reoccurring dreams or nightmares, or was that just a one-time thing?
I had this one that was really, really weird in that it was almost like this recurring heartbeat, but in the form of this boulder that would smash through the floor and just sort of destroy the room. And it doesn't sound scary by any means, but it was so loud and grating and ominous. And then it would like poof, explode. And I that was a recurring one that I have, and I don't understand. It didn't connect to anything, but that was the only really recurring dream that I do recall having.
Have you ever read Edgar Allan Poe?
Absolutely. I've actually, in this new script that I've actually been writing, I reference that. There's a hitman who is talking to a prospective client and references the Telltale Heart. And so, yes, I remember reading that as a young lad too. And I was just like, man, this dude really got it. Yeah, like it was so rad at the time. Like I loved it. And then it was like, okay, now here I am I think I was grade 6, grade 7. And I started babysitting for one of my mom's friends. And they had wall-to-wall Stephen King. And that was it.
That actually lines up with one of our other questions, which is in your childhood, did you have anybody else in your friends or family group who were fans of horror? So this was a parent of a friend's parent?
Yeah. So my mom had a job where she was working with foster kids, youth at risk and that kind of thing. And so her coworker, Patty, they would do what adults do, go out, party, you name it. And her husband was Big Dave McLean, who is a very well-known blues artist, super cool guy, would tell me all these stories about all these blues legends that he got to play with and drink with. But that was only after he'd do his gigs. So here I'd be whatever by myself after the kids have gone to sleep for 3, 4, 5 hours, waiting until everybody comes home in order to, distract myself with these books. And then I discovered Clive Barker. And, he's even more twisted and more visceral. And of course, right around that time, by this time, of course, Alien had come out with Ridley Scott and Blade Runner, and then Hellraiser is a little bit further on. But that stuff, I was just like, VHS was king.
You mentioned not making certain connections until you were older. When you were a kid, did you participate in Halloween up there?
Oh, yeah, of course. Okay. And that was something that was really useful for us because we were dirt poor. And, my mom being a single parent, it was super, super tough. I remember she'd work 2 jobs and we'd never see her. And so there was not often a lot of food in the home. And I actually remember there was one Christmas when there was a knock at the door and it was somebody delivering a Christmas hamper. And I accepted it and said, thank you. And then I turned around and I was like, wait a minute. They only give these things to poor people. We must be poor.
Right.
And then it was like, yeah, of course. And then it was like, that was also the time where I'd be like, okay, we had a kind of orange juice up here. I don't know if it was down in the States or not, probably, but it was called Beep. And it was like an orange drink. And
did it come in plastic barrels that cut the sides of your mouth when you drink out of them?
Yeah, although we used, they did have that, but I remember specifically in this instance, it was like a container, like when you have a quart of milk, but it's like
like the cardboard folded.
Yeah, like that. And so it was one morning, and my mom was off. My younger brothers, I let them have the last of the milk for their Rice Krispies, and the only thing that was left was this Beep juice. And I had Rice Krispies with Beep, and that's kind of like, it was really it was really rough. And, pork chops with mushroom gravy, I will never.
It's like
again.
a bologna and ketchup sandwich moment. Yeah.
Yeah. Bologna. Once I found out what bologna was, I was like, can I have something else?
I just love the thank you. Hey, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Did you have a favorite costume or a least favorite costume for Halloween that you remember?
I loved putting on like werewolf masks. And in fact, to this day, I have a werewolf mask that I will just randomly put on. And then I'll walk into the kitchen with my kids' back turned to me. And then they like, and I'm like, just standing there looking at them. And then
have you seen the Mark Duplass films or series Creep?
I have not.
Okay, watch those.
Okay.
Maybe not with the kids around.
Yeah, the kids around. Yeah,
I will make a note of that for sure. But
he has a character that he plays when he puts on his werewolf mask. It's pretty funny.
Yes.
Nice.
First thing
I don't know if it's funny, but
yeah,
you know what I mean.
Right. Yeah.
Was there ever a time in your childhood when you were terrified of something in real life?
Well, yeah, of course. And this goes back to what I was sharing earlier about many wounds. See, with my mother being a single parent, she took on a lot of risks to, try to make sense out of her own life and have some happiness and that kind of thing. And we ended up in a domestic situation where this guy was literally beating the shit out of my mom. And sexually abusing her, broke her arm, threw her across the room. And I remember I'm like, whatever it is, grades 5 or 6. And I have to stand up to this guy and he's well over 6 feet. He's a karate sort of master or something like that, or kung fu is what it was. And I told him to stop. And he just looked at me with these black eyes and he's like, what are you going to do about it? And I just froze and I cowered and I ran into the other room and he continued to beat the shit out of my mom. And I was like with my little brothers and I was like, we got to get the fuck out of here. He's going to kill us all. And I summoned all the courage I had to open that door, run out the front door in the middle of winter and just bolt. And I went to and hit us in a back lane. I remember my mom got out and he chased her down and he dragged her back, kicking and screaming by the hair back into the house. And eventually she was able to get free and we hid in the bush like animals. And he came out and he was like, you better come out now. What's best for you is to come out now. If you don't, I'm going to fucking kill you. And like, this is also in the early 80s where there's nothing you can do. You go to the police, they're like, well, we didn't catch him in the act of doing anything, so we can't physically do. We can have a restraining order, but like, what is that going to do? It just says to him, he can't come around. But he did. He killed our dog. He ended up going to one of my mom's friends' work and called them and said, I'm sitting out your work right now and I got a gun. And if you don't tell me where Sue and the kids are, I'm going to go in there and blow her head off. So it's just like, this is the whole world of real life horror that we survived. And it was deadly. And it stuck with me. I am still triggered to this day by the stuff that we had to live through and literally try to survive. I remember it was maybe a year later, I was going to a hockey tournament down in North Dakota and there was some parent was driving me and I saw his car was broken down on the side of the road and I literally lost my shit. And I started screaming and I was like, don't stop. And they're like, what's going on with this kid? And I couldn't obviously divulge everything, but it was like, clearly I was, not normal. And I had been triggered by this guy who, wanted to kill us and my mom just because of his own, psychotic illnesses. So, yeah, I mean, that's a real life situation where, hey, you come face to face with it. I do recall my grandfather when I told you earlier he was atheist. Towards the end of his life, he was coming around to maybe the idea that there is something beyond. And I remember him in a couple months before or something like that. He was very lucid, and he was afraid of dying alone. And I remember holding him as he took his last breath. Pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But because of everything he did for me, I wanted to honor him in that way. Mm-hmm. And I did it.
I'm glad that you're able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, there does come a time when we reckon with this thing we call life. And, I find life is way more interesting believing in a spirit world and knowing that we are souls and we exist for however many lifetimes trying to become more of a complete being, more life experience. We make mistakes in every life. We get reborn and we find out what is going to make us more complete as a spirit and ascend some ladder, whatever. I think there's sort of there's various faiths from around the world that have those common stories and common beliefs. And despite languages and oceans and continents between them, I find that those origin stories, the mythologies, are really fascinating in it. And I believe there is some truth in all of it. And that gives me a lot of comfort because, as I said, I think life is way more interesting when you just, my best friend, he's an orthopedic surgeon, and he just is like, no, everything is physiological and we just shut off and that's it. We dead. And I'm like, well, that's no fun.
Well,
I mean, there has to be something besides that. It's a little too simple, but yeah. I like to think all possibilities are possible, and it is entirely possible that we are just dirt, and it's all chemistry and physics. But what if you don't know that unless you've crossed over? That's the only way to answer that question. So it is still entirely possible that there's something after this life, and that's what I choose to hope to believe is at least something on the other side, and even more so, hopefully, you're reacquainted with the people that you've known in this life. And if not, and it's just, blind reincarnation and you just recycle, at least there's something after this life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a lot more hopeful than just the blackness, right?
Mm-hmm. I do find it interesting that you said that you were there for your grandfather's passing and he didn't want to die alone. When you said he was atheist, so you look at it black and white, you would think that wouldn't matter to him if he's an atheist because it's nothing afterwards. But you do have that sudden just realization when it's there, when it's happening, that you start to have those thoughts. What if it's not just death and just the end?
Yeah, absolutely. And also just from the perspective of we love our families, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, even though he was not my grandfather by blood, he took my mother and loved her and tried to nurture her as best as he could, and did the same with us. Mm-hmm. And as a human being, he is the one exception above others. And it was really interesting because he had some very powerful people in our world oversee his funeral. One of them was Rufus Goodstriker, and he said to the town in Kenora, "We've lost a great man, and who among us is going to take his place?" Because he really did.
Big shoes to fill.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, when you're looking around the world and you're seeing the good and bad in everyone, when you see exceptional people and you develop an emotional bond, it's a beautiful thing. And I do go, and his ashes are buried out at this island that I think I told you about earlier, as is my mother's ashes. They're both buried out there side by side. And it was just a couple of weeks ago I was out there and I feasted them, which is what we do in our culture. And to me, it's incredibly comforting to believe that they are there with us.
Yeah.
And they are, witnessing the things that they couldn't do. in their lifetimes, because everything is so fleeting. We have no idea when we're going to pass, and when we're going to be called, as we say, by Creator, to the next life, and when our spirit will travel.
Yeah. Was there ever a time in your childhood when you felt exceptionally blissful? Kind of the opposite of the last question.
Well, that's an interesting question. I mean, I find that in the Kenora area where I was born, and my family is, as I said, my native family is in Wabigoon, which is northwestern Ontario. It's an incredibly beautiful and diverse place. And I love walking barefoot so that I can connect even more and toughen myself up, because it's also like another reminder of that, we live in these concrete jungles, and it disconnects us. So I literally will ground myself again. But a lot of times when I'm in the forest, I feel as though someone is watching me, but it's not scary. Like it really is as though these spirits, these ancestors, and whatever else is there is literally with me, and I give great comfort. And so that's a really important thing. So as far as the bliss, it is literally when I can be in nature.
The next two questions also come as a pair. We're going to start with the negative one so we can end on the positive one again.
Okay.
Do you remember the first person you hurt?
We had a very difficult upbringing, my brothers and I. And my mom, in order to cope with all of her stuff, she was a pothead. And she would smoke an ounce a week and all kinds of other things. And that was how she had to deal with her life and what she was feeling and everything else. So that left me to my brothers and I. And my younger brother he was a bit of a dick. And I remember I put him through a wall in a fight. And I hated doing it. But in the middle of it, right, he'd be like, no, you're hurting me. And then I would stop, and then he'd laugh at me like, I got you, motherfucker. And I was like, you piece of shit. And then boom, boom, boom. That was really difficult to do, and I hated doing it, but I worked out like a demon when I was a young man, because I was a very angry young man at times, because I had a chip on my shoulder of like, this was, these were the cards that were dealt, and I didn't really like it. And so I literally wanted to be fully in control. And so I didn't want to have any excuse for someone to be able to beat me physically.
Yeah.
I wanted them to respect me when they looked at me and go like, whoa, this guy's cut. Like, I'm not going to fuck with him. Because you got to remember, I also grew up with Arnold, right? And Conan and all that stuff. And it was like, this guy was a fucking god. But to fast forward a little bit, my brother came in, was still a part of my life then. And my wife was expecting with our second child. And he got really, really high. And he came into our house, and his eyes were completely black, like no humanity in them at all. And he came after my wife, and I beat the shit out of him, and I broke his ribs, and I called the cops on him. And that was really, really difficult. But that was it. I was like, you are not welcome in my house ever again until you can get yourself clean. And there have been various attempts to try to make up between us, but he just harbors so much anger that he hasn't resolved. And he claims he wants to be in our lives, but he hasn't been able to prove that to me yet. So that's a real regret, because forgiveness is a part of our culture. And my youngest brother, I have a good relationship with him, and still have maintained a relationship with him. And so I do try to always maintain forward focus and just sort of say, hey, how can I be a better version of myself than I was yesterday? And that's the philosophy that we live by as a company.
That kind of ties in with as I said, the opposite, the question comes in pairs. So the opposite is, do you remember the first person you helped?
Well, I mean, the first one that comes to mind is my grandfather, because he was so busy, and I wanted his love. And like, so how could I do that? I could help him like sweep out the barn and do those types of things, which I knew he would, in the absence of me not being there, he would have to do it himself. And I felt like that's the least I can do for what he's done for me, was to be a generous person and to always, never put yourself above doing that.
Well, both of those questions, it's one of those things where you never know what's going to come up until you ask, but usually the things that do come up do connect with something that is important to the guest. And it's always interesting finding out what comes up, because like I say, you don't really know what's going to come up until you ask. All right, so that handles the childhood section. Going into teen section.
Yeah.
And now a 10-second self-advertising spot. We absolutely believe that word of mouth means more than any kind of advertising campaign. If you like what we're doing, please just tell somebody about us. Back to the show.
What was I going to say? So you mentioned Alien, Blade Runner, and Hellraiser. I think those came up in your teens. If we were to say, top horror media that stood out to you from your teens, would it be those three, or would you pick something else?
I would say Hellraiser was probably the most amazing experience for me, with the box and Pinhead and the chattering teeth.
It's just so original. That. You have slashers, you have otherworldly sci-fi fantasy stuff, but something just, it was definitely unique at the time.
Yeah, and the box, right? Like, this box that's been around forever, and did you just open that fucking thing, you idiot? Right. It's like, but it was like, and the body, the sort of metamorphosis that the body is going through when you're transforming, and there's cuts and everything else. I mean, to me, and even like I absolutely loved when he was skinned and all you saw was sinew and blood red. Like that was so rad. Like I don't have any other way to describe it, but I was like, that's awesome. And then it's like, by the way, in order for him to get his skin back, he's got to bring some people in order to, rebuild himself. Yeah. I mean, that was so original. I'm like, that is cool. Yeah.
I think, at least my personal take on it, like body mod's been a thing and S&M's been a thing, but I think the thing that was new about it is that it was very, that's the word I'm looking for. It was definitely a very new thing for whoever it was that allowed that to be put on the screen.
It wasn't a new thing in like, literature or film or anything, even in movies, because I mean there are some racy international movies over in like Italy and other European countries, but it was definitely something new for mainstream American media. Right. Like that was a leap.
And it was New Line Cinema. I remember that they were the distributor, and I was like, okay, when's the next one? And then they got progressively worse. Which is
there are things 12 now, I think.
Oh God, you know what? If I ever had the chance to reboot that in the right way with Clive's blessing, I would be. I would kill it. I would.
The most recent one was pretty good. It was good.
Yeah, I've read bits and pieces of it, and I haven't seen. But I know, like, there's such a rich world in there. Like I always remember. Like Weaveworld was a book that they were like, it's impossible to do. And I was like, I know what I could do to make it cool and make it like translate from the page to screen, which is always a very difficult thing. And that's been a criticism of a lot of books not being able to do that. And of course, I'm very much aware. I've got the poster, The Shining with Jack. That's one of my favorites of all time as well. And it was interesting that, of course, Steve didn't like the fact that, his impression was, well, he just came out of Cuckoo's Nest. So everyone thought he was crazy. And I wanted to see this descent into madness. And I was like, I think you're underselling Jack and what he was able to do with that character. Because I got it, and it was, I loved that movie. Kubrick and his the framing and how he filled the frame with their various things, not just the twins and the elevator full of blood and the old lady corpse in the bathtub wanting to get on with the kid and stuff. Like, it was so incredible.
Well, hang on. So everything that you mentioned about The Shining, they're all the famous scenes. Yeah. And it's all visual stuff. Was there any emotional connection to any of this stuff?
Oh, Danny, of course. The young kid having to live through it, right?
Excellent point.
And that's why, like Dr. Sleep, I actually really liked it. There were things with it that were, I would have done differently. But as a quote unquote sequel or follow up or whatever, I really enjoyed it. There were things in there that I really liked. And that was something that I was pleasantly surprised by, because I was like, oh, this is going to suck. Just like with It, they did It. That book like terrified me.
So was it the fact that you were identifying with the kids in that one that was the emotional significance there, or was there something else?
Absolutely. And I think that was one of the things that really stuck with me when I started reading King, right? Is here's a guy who like wrote like a demon, right? Everybody knows about his process and everything else, and how he just churned stuff out in a Herculean effort. But what he always took care to do was to make sure that you were that protagonist. There was something within that character who would allow you to feel and connect emotionally with them, so that when they were scared, you would be scared. And that was a really important lesson for me when I was teaching myself how to write. And that's always stuck with me in any situation. And it comes back to authenticity and truth. And I carry that forward with every character that I have the opportunity to work on in whatever film.
Did you have any really scary dreams or recurring nightmares as a teen?
As a general rule, nothing specific, but I think failure was at the heart of the subconscious that I was dreaming about. I've always wanted to achieve. And so like even, last night I got this Best Director Award for Many Wounds at Gimli here. And it was completely shocking. I didn't expect it at all. I didn't see it coming. And I went up there and I was very humble and gracious, as I always am. But there is a part of you as a filmmaker that when you get recognized by your peers, as small as a festival like Gimli is compared to, Tribeca or TIFF or Berlinale or Cannes or something, it actually matters. And, being able to stand up with the people around you and just being recognized, it does mean something. And despite the fact that there's a gazillion festivals out there and whatnot, having the recognition, it does go back to a lot of that stuff where, whether you're an actor or a director or whatever, it's no matter what, it feels good to be told that you have achieved, and that really fills your heart.
Cool. Very accurate. Again, flipping that question around, was there ever a time in your teens when you felt exceptionally calm or safe or bliss? And I'm going to guess that this is again in nature.
Yeah, but also I think starting to find myself and my voice. I remember being able to play sports and have your voice and develop friendships and become your own man. Like, that was really, really something that I went into without any fear. I wanted to see the world as far and wide as I could. And it was really interesting, like just beyond my teens, because like I said, I was 21 or whatever it was when I went to Italy, and I was immediately then traveling all over the world while my friends, some of whom are doctors and lawyers now, and they were in post-secondary university for many, many, many years trying to figure out who they are and what they're going to do with their lives and so on. And I was already living it back then. Like the shackles were off, and I was unafraid to go anywhere in the world and go through any experience, because I want to see, I want to hear, I want to be touched, in my soul, in this, so I'm very cognizant of the fact that our bodies are, these husks that are energized by whatever is within us, our spirit and everything else.
All right. So those are the teen questions. Moving into the adult now.
And now a 10-second self-advertising spot. Please support us at patreon.com/horrormakesushappy. We have a $1 a month tier, which is just $12 a year, or 50 cents an episode, which is a steal when you think about it. There's also a high tier, which grants early access to unedited interviews. Now back to the show.
If you were to pick 2 or 3 media that really stood out to you as impactful in the horror genre, what first 2-3 things come to mind?
I loved Alien. I really loved like the chest burster aliens. I my 13-year-old daughter, I was like, when we had to get up early for roller hockey tournament a couple of weeks ago in Irvine. And she was in her room. We had like a suite, and I opened up the door, and she's like, her hair is like, and she looked, and I was like, you look like Newt. And she's like, what? And I'm like, you got to see Aliens. Like, that is a gas film. And she hasn't yet, but she will, I'm sure. But that franchise was really, really cool. I loved it.
You look completely like Newt, or just mostly?
She's mostly, yeah, exactly. Mostly. Exactly. And you know what? I didn't really mind. It was a real departure. At first, I didn't like Fincher's Alien 3.
Yeah.
But then I really came to appreciate it.
It's a good movie. A lot of people just can't get over the fact that they did away with Newt and Higgs. But once you get past that, it is a good and very well-made film.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. And so I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that show. So the Alien franchise, really liked it. Less so Predator and stuff. Like, it kind of got a little campy at times. But the original with Arnold was that was pretty badass. So many great lines that I still recite to my buddies. I remember when I was at Red River going to school there after high school, and I got to be a DJ. And I would always pull this stuff off where I'd be like pulling, Arnold clips and that kind of thing, and playing them in between the music and introducing the different tunes and that kind of stuff. And I loved it because he was literally larger than life. And,
Come back to Aliens and Predator, the through line that I see there for both of those, tying in with other stuff we've talked about, fighting something stronger than yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Any other horror media really stand out to you from, I guess 20 onwards?
Well, I mean, I loved Frankenstein in a lot of ways. It's not horror. It was beautiful, and I do think it was too long in places and whatnot, but I love that idea of being able to go into that, have that transformation. I did love Jack in Wolf. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
What'd you like about Wolf?
Well, just that it was very naturalistic in a lot of ways, and you allowed him as a character to sort of be this, evolve into the wolf. You know what I mean? It was always there, but to see the way that he did that, and it was kind of the same with Witches of Eastwick, right? I mean, that was not a horror by any means. It was a lot of entertainment, but he plays the devil, and enticing these ladies to all take turns with him and stuff. Like, that was a lot of fun. So yeah, I mean, the transformations, I think, is probably one of the through lines. But also, you got to come out and survive, right? I mean, that's part of it. Is do you, as the hero, live to tell the tale, and what do we learn about ourselves when we come out of it, or do we? Right? Yeah. I mean, I respected, what was the one, The Mist by King.
Yeah.
That movie, I respected the ending, and I know a lot of people didn't like it, but I was like, you know what? That really made it work, right? Like, they didn't make it happy. It was like right there. They'd only gone, if they could only somehow survive for an extra little, no. And that was it. They turned it off, right? So, yeah, that's definitely one that I really liked. They filmed a long walk up here. I didn't really like that too much. To me, it was not really interesting, and I didn't
vibe like kind of a simple premise.
Yeah, it really was, and I would have liked to have seen more character development. But hey, they didn't engage me as a writer or director, so they they had their take and got it into production, and then poof, it was out in the world, and gave some actors opportunities to grow and build their resumes. So it was what it was. I'm really trying to think.
That's a good list. Usually we try to go for 2 or 3, so that's plenty. So the next question I want to ask is going to be over your entire life and could be about any genre, not just horror. What movie would you say you've watched more times than any other?
Well, I did mention The Shining. Apocalypse Now is another. There's those two as far as classics that I'll just turn on and I will watch and I'll watch and I'll watch. I can't, off the top of my head, I can't think of anything horror and really go ahead.
Of the ones that we just talked about here, would you pick any of them? Like if we were to ask what your favorite movie is, would it be one of those or would you pick something else?
I would say there would be one of those in there would be something that really resonates with me.
So next question, do you see a common thread about what kind of horror movies do you like? Cannibalism, occult, metaphysical?
I really, you mentioned cannibalism. I really wanted to like that one that was set in the jungle there.
Green Inferno?
Yeah. I really wanted to like it. And then I was just like, well, they're really kind of,
that movie was a comedy.
Yeah. It didn't land for me, and that was really too bad. And especially when you consider, like, we as Indigenous are all Indigenous, and all humans are Indigenous in their own way. But those of us who are of these cultures that are considered so-called primitive and land-based and earth-based and that kind of thing, I really think that people need to pay more respect to not making them caricatures. That's something, we're in 2026 now, man. Like you can't be doing that shit. Like we've had enough damage over the decades. It's time to really step it up. One of the ones that I would say is a horror that is one of my favorites is Dracula with like Keanu Reeves. I love the guy. He's Canadian, but the acting was not great. Gary Oldman, fucking fantastic.
As he does everything.
My God. Those and what they did with the shadows.
See,
like where
now you're leaning into where I thought you were going to go with this. I suspected you were going to go with creature feature because werewolves, aliens, predators,
Frankenstein,
Dracula. That's kind of where I thought that was going to go.
Yeah. No. My brain came around to it as we're delving into this. I absolutely loved that. Like, again, that was Coppola, right? Like, it's just fucking crazy. Like, there was some stuff that was like, but I loved the off-speed sort of movement POV of when he would go into the room and suck the blood out of these young ladies and everything. To me, that was like, I really loved that. And I've crossed oceans of time to find you. Like that's a fucking classic line. And he did it perfectly. Like I believed it, despite knowing, okay, yeah, it's Gary Oldman and he's got a lot of makeup and whatever. That was really cool. Which reminded me, what was that one with Eggers that he just did?
Nosferatu?
Yeah. I really wanted to love that There were parts of it that were beautiful, but
Yeah.
it was flat for me in a few places. And that's,
I enjoyed it.
I
It
mean,
was
it worked really well. I mean, and Northman was also really cool. But, you knew what it was from the very get-go. This is the premise, and it didn't deviate. And that was kind of disappointing to me because I would have liked to have seen and lived a little bit more in that world that I didn't know about instead of just being like this grown-up revenge fantasy. So that was that. But
this would be the spot where we talk about the common themes that have cropped up for you and why those are important to you, and then how those intersect with horror as a genre. So for you, really, I see kind of two things that then fit under one umbrella. But to talk about the two things first, one big thing is obviously place within your community, talking about what your role would be in life, storyteller, spirituality, finding your voice, both with and without the community, place in nature, time spent with your grandfather, relationships with your mother and siblings. And then the other big topic was either control or loss of control. A very big part of that relating to your mother's partner. But then that playing out in a number of different ways, starting with maybe working out a lot and being inspired by Arnold, but also, the dreams about failure, tying in. Some of this also ties in with the creature feature stuff, because a lot of the creature feature stuff relates to, I don't want to say power fantasies because that's not exactly the right word, but, power and control. Also potentially might even tie in with the dream you had about the heartbeat, and the boulder smashing through the floor and maybe not being able to control that. But both of these things, the place within your community and the control aspect, I think both of those fit under identification would be the larger topic. And having now summarized all the things that we've talked about, I think you can tell me if I'm wrong. You can tell me if there's something that you think that needs to be added, tweaked slightly. Are we off a little bit?
No, I think the psychoanalysis is pretty good, and I appreciate that. I mean, I haven't really taken a great deal of time to delve into any of those kinds of things, the navel gazing and that kind of stuff. I mean, I have here and there jotted down things that maybe will one day be in a memoir that helped influence me and say who I am. I know that when I did a film called Path of Souls, that was a pretty spiritual film, and it was done when my kids were very, very little, and I did have that recurring sort of sense of mortality and saying, okay, well, what happens if I was gone? What could I leave behind that my kids, when they're grown up, maybe understand who Dad was and what his values were and what he thought was important to talk about. That I did that film and I put them in as extras and where I could and that kind of thing. But it's a really, really awesome world that we live in, where we get to explore story in so many different facets. And like I said, for me, I mean, how are we? Like, I think the thing about horror is that it really takes us out of the ordinary and takes us to a place of danger. And when you do that, it's a natural endorphin release, because we're like so sedentary, right? We're in front of our phones constantly. We're the minutia and banality of every day. So like when you get a chance to do something and see something that's really cool in this particular genre, why wouldn't you go for it and maybe be attracted to it? So yeah, like I say, I mean, sure, the other genres within horror, not necessarily my cup of tea. That's fine. I understand it. I know one of my sons has seen all of the Terrifiers and laugh about it, and he gets whatever he gets out of it. But he's not me. He's himself, and he's got his buddies, and they do that for whatever reason. They want to laugh through someone getting chainsawed up the butt or whatever it was. That's up to them. They can experience that for themselves. For me, it's less interesting because I want to understand the human psyche beyond that and what is possible. you've talked about transformation, and I think that's absolutely true. That is a huge part of what I like to see. And it goes back to the hero's journey. The hero's journey in and of itself is transformation, right? Where you start somewhere and you end up somewhere. And, that was in Joseph Campbell's Hero of a Thousand Faces and all those other mythological books, is that you really do the classic tenets of any story. The hero goes through something and survives or doesn't. And if they do, what have they learned from it, and or what does the audience learn from that experience? That we are, when pushed to the limits, we are greater than themselves.
So, having narrowed in on the topics that are of interest to you, normally the follow-up question that we ask then is, why horror? Because couldn't you maybe explore these things in other genres? In your case, you were talking about the fact that horror is a place to talk about danger and transformation. Transformation you could talk about in other genres. I don't know if you can get as either deep or detailed with the sense of danger as you can in horror, but what do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, you certainly can, right? Like this Coppermine story, there are kind of elements of that. And I've tried to sort of push that envelope a little bit. It was based on a best-selling novel, and it was written by a white guy in 2008. And I've tried to flip it around as much as I can to tell it from an indigenous perspective and incorporate everything that we've talked about. While continuing in with this sort of action kind of historical film with various things going on and the legal drama. I'm always going to try to bring everything that I can that is interesting to me, because I think others will find it interesting and worth looking into. But yeah, I mean, theoretically, it could be done anywhere. I think where the biggest, greatest emotional impact for some of this stuff is within horror, and it doesn't get the respect that it maybe necessarily deserves. And, I think that just means it's incumbent upon us that are loving the genre to push the envelope and say, how much more can we go without like making it unwatchable for whatever reason, because there's too much gore or whatever. I mean, everyone's got their own tolerance dose there, but I think I think the world is way more interesting with horror in it.
Yeah. And like you say there about it having the greatest emotional reaction, but one of the things, I didn't exactly say it when I posed the question, but sometimes what I will suggest is that war movies or war documentaries sometimes get close to talking about a sense of danger, but it can be, I don't want to say it's hit or miss. What's the word I'm looking for? Like some horror or some war movies, they're action movies. There's not as much of a focus on danger. Sometimes spy movies, and then that's kind of why I said war documentaries, because I think sometimes the documentaries focus more on the actual risk of death that a lot of war movies made for entertainment gloss over. And as you said, it's the level of the emotional reaction that you can achieve in the horror genre that you don't necessarily get in other genres.
Yeah, of course. I would not disagree with that. Although Dunkirk, to me, it didn't land. I didn't care about the kid or the young man, right? There are others like that. That's what's incumbent upon us as filmmakers to try to do better, because as I said, going back to that sort of
identification,
then you lost me, and I'm going to turn it off. And I'm amazed that there are studio films that continue to this day and age. They pour tens of millions or maybe $100 million into something, and they miss that. Like, it's the script first. Do you know how much energy and heart and soul I put into a film, and I live with it for how many years? Like, I don't want to do stuff like that if I'm not prepared to fully go in and go after it, right? I don't know how many times we've had to remortgage our house a few times, and it really fucking sucks. Because you hope that this one you go in with the belief. And my wife, God bless her, she will follow me to the ends of the earth. And that's a really incredible trait. And I'm forever grateful for her to believe in my vision. But there's a stress. You got, we got 4 kids and mortgage and their bills every freaking week and month. And it would be nice every once in a while to like be able to appreciate the good things and just, I never have enough time for writing, and I just sort of like have to force myself because I'm like, oh geez, why haven't I written this yet? And I've got all these notes everywhere on different pieces of paper and notes on my laptop and on my phone, and I just go, well, wouldn't it be awesome if I could have some time to be able to do that and go to where, the next great story.
Having limitations is one of the difficult parts about living in this universe.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah. Speaking of which, we're getting close on time for me. Yes. I do have to get north of the city for the Q&A. The film is running.
Actually, we only had one question left, which was, is there anything else that you thought earlier in the call that you didn't get a chance to say?
Well, I mean, it is going to come back to really, if there are people out there who have the means with which to get behind culturally important projects in whatever genre. We don't have the access to private capital the way that others have. And, being able to have a little bit of creative freedom by working with people who are willing to take a risk and work on something that's really interesting within the cultural space that goes into these types of genres. I would love for the universe to align so that we can meet these kinds of people, and not just for myself, but any Indigenous filmmaker in particular. Like our voices really are unique. And when one of us succeeds, all of us succeeds. I never thought in my lifetime I'd see someone like Taika Waititi win an Oscar, and he did. And it was like my jaw dropped, and I felt so proud. Even though he's Maori, he's still one of us. We got so much more to do. I'm going to be 54 this year. I don't know how much longer I'm going to be around. Do I get to tell one more story? Do I get to tell 10? If I do, I'm going to be like so grateful to be able to do that. And hopefully I can reach as many people as I can with that film.
On that topic, before we hit the closing, you want to remind people what you're currently working on?
What I'm currently working on. Yeah. So I've got this really cool story. I've got 2 of them. And I just pitched this one in Banff at the Banff World Media Festival. It's called Project Hummingbird. And it's a really cool story, which is sort of like my homage to my love of sci-fi, Star Wars in particular, Blade Runner, all of that kind of stuff. And it's about a 10-year-old Ojibwe boy in 1966 who is fleeing Canada with his mother to go down to New Mexico, where the mother's sister lives. And the husband in New Mexico, he's a civilian who works at the skunk works in Los Alamos. And lo and behold, they've happened to uncover a spaceship, an alien craft. And they're keeping it in an airplane hangar, but they can't turn it on until this young 10-year-old Ojibwe boy comes along, and he's able to, with his mind.
Okay.
We have so many stories. I have encountered so many elders who have told me about our ancestors from the stars, the star people, origin stories, everything else. So, we get into that a little bit without being too weird about it. I tried to make it as very entertaining and mainstream as I could, while bringing a lot of my own culture into it, which apparently people thought really interesting. I was actually shortlisted for the TIFF CBC Screenwriter Award. I didn't win, but they were like, hey, we want to give a special shout out because, seeing Indigenous sci-fi being so great and incorporating quantum mechanics and everything else, they appreciated that. So I know it's going to get made, and it's going to be a really, really fucking cool film. I've got another one that is more of a drama, but I've got a horror that I'm working on that's a revenge fantasy that's pretty pretty sweet too. And that is based on some of the personal experience where, my grandmother was caught up in residential schools like many of us have. And unfortunately, a lot of the commonality that we as Indigenous people have is trauma that we've survived or our families have survived. She committed suicide at 22 years old because she couldn't deal with the fact that my mother was, she was conceived as a product of rape. And she was taken away and forced into adoption. So my 14-year-old grandmother at the time, when she birthed my mom, she got pregnant at 13, never got to bond and have that emotional connection with my mother. And then she had another daughter who was an auntie of mine who I didn't get to know either. Long and short of it, I've got a revenge fantasy that is centered around that. And it's so cool. And it's in that horror genre, and I can't give much away, but it is really, really fucking cool. Like I'm about 40 pages into the script, and there's some wicked stuff going on in there. And it's so twisted, and it starts out very normal. We open up at a diner, and you've got like this native hitman who is, talking to this prospective client. And, initially he wants him to kidnap and kill this guy who's a priest. And then he just, as they're talking, he's like, well, what if I did it myself? And he's like, well, it adds a layer, but let's talk about this a little bit, And so then we go through, and this guy who has never killed anyone is deciding he wants to get revenge on this priest who, it turns out, was the one who impregnated his grandmother. And, created a lot of regrets in their life, which is somewhat autobiographical because it is one of the things that I really have hang-ups about, is that I never got to know my grandmother. I never got to see her eyes. I never got to see her face. She never got to know us. And of course, she never got to know my mother either. And when you think about all of those things in a sort of modern context, and what can drive someone to revenge to the point where they might actually want to torture and kill someone is pretty heavy stuff, but it's in that horror genre that's I'm really excited to try to bring that one to the world.
Cool. We will look forward to all of that, and we can link to whatever it is that you want to link to. We're going to follow up with you offline to get bio and pictures and stuff that we can use for promotional stuff. Thank you for your time. And for anybody out there listening, if you like the psychologically minded deep dives that we're doing and want to help us out, like, share, subscribe, tell a friend, buy a shirt, buy us coffee, or join us on Discord, Patreon, or whatever social media platform you prefer. All of our links are on our Linktree page, which you can find at horrormakesushappy.com.